RightOnline's columnist and author of The Tyranny of Clichés, Jonah Goldberg.
Where's my eye of the tiger, damn it? I am absolutely delighted to be here. I'm happier than Helen Thomas at a Hamas rally. I'm happier than Joe Biden on Lime Jello Day at the home. Happier than Roman Polanski at a Hannah Montana concert. Take it easy. So in the lavish time that they've given me, I thought I would just sort of talk very quickly, or as quickly as I can, about sort of politics and the new media and all of this. You know, in terms of internet years, I'm Methuselah. You know, I've been doing this since 1998. Andrew Breitbart and I used to sit and instant message each other, both in our underwear, 3,000 miles apart all day long. And we had no idea that it was going to turn into something like this. And I think one of the things that people need to keep in mind is that while there's a lot of talk about how we're entering this new age, new era, and social media, and breaking down the monopoly of the big media and all that stuff, and it's all true, there's another way to look at it, is that we're actually going back to restoring the media landscape the way it was supposed to be, and actually the way it was for most of American history. When Alexis de Tocqueville came to the United States, one of the things he noticed was that newspapers were the heart of communities. He says newspapers build communities and communities build newspapers. And back in those days, newspapers represented community interests, community perspectives. You had newspapers, they had a bias to them, but they were open about their bias. They were open about what their preferences were. And they attracted people of like mind. It's where they got their information. It's where they got their marching orders. It's where they looked for corroboration of what they believed, and they looked to carry their cause. And that was the state of what newspapers and the media were for all of the 19th century and into the 20th century. If you look in Europe, the newspapers still have a position, right? I mean, the Telegraph is conservative, the Times is Tory, the Guardian is left-wing. It doesn't mean they're bad newspapers, but you know where they're coming from. What happened in the United States was that throughout the 1930s, we basically had a situation where the government basically trained people to take orders from the government. And then after World War II, you had a society that had sort of fallen in step and learned to take orders from the government. And you had these big institutions, the big news networks, that basically got to decide what was the news you deserved to have. And it was this great parentheses in American media for about 2 generations. Remember how Walter Cronkite used to end the CBS Evening News? He was like, and that's the way it is, right? Not, that's the news we thought was important, or here's the stuff we thought you needed to know, or anything like that, but this sort of voice of God, that's the way it is, as if there was this ontological, epistemological certitude that Walter Cronkite was the voice of God, some burning bush or burning mustache in his case, that was going to tell us, you know, everything that we needed to know and nothing else. The New York Times, all the news that's fit to print, is the same sort of attitude. And that's all breaking down, thanks to what the people in this room, the bloggers, groups like, people like pioneers like Michelle Malkin and Andrew Breitbart, they've sort of torn all that down, and now the web is turning into what the media always sort of was. Until that great parentheses. It was this place for communities to meet, to organize, to get information about the things that they care about. And I think it is a much healthier way to have media in this country and how to deal with politics, rather than have one establishment that gets to tell the entire country, here are the bad people, and they all happen to be conservative, right? And here are the good people, here are the people to trust, here's the sound science, here's the bad science, here's the establishment people, and David Gergen is about to talk. Instead, it's a much more democratic system where we all get to hammer these things out and have arguments, because democracy is about disagreement. It's not about agreement. It's about having arguments. And that's one of the great things that groups like this and people like you have managed to do, is restore the role of democracy and disagreement in American politics. And I think it's an incredibly healthy thing. The problem is figuring out how to make money from it. And that's still a challenge, and that's going to be a while. But one of the things I talk to young journalism students all the time, and one of the things I always tell them is, You know, look, the reason why all those heroes like Edward R. Murrow and all those guys went into television is because they couldn't get decent jobs in radio. Right? TV, no one knew what TV was going to be. And it's an amazing thing that now that the bloggers and the right-wing media have adopted many of the things that made television journalism allegedly great, they're now considered illegitimate. You know, James O'Keefe goes out and does hidden cameras, and the New York Times gets its panties in a bunch and screams about how it's unethical. Well, that's how 60 Minutes made its name, was through hidden cameras. And it turns out that when you turn the tables on the establishment all of a sudden says it's unfair. And that's okay, because when you hear them screaming, you know you're doing your job right. But the long-term goal, I'm all in favor of the gonzo guerrilla journalism that we have. I'm all in favor of sticking it to the man and letting your freak flag fly and all of that. But at the end of the day, as conservatives, one of the things you have to actually care about is taking back the majority culture. And it's good and fine and healthy to say that we're the alternative media and that we are the alternative point of view and we are the alternative movement. But the goal is to make them the alternative and us the mainstream. Right? And so at some point we have to stop, talking purely in the language of victims, how the mainstream media is unfair to us. And we're talking more, and I think Michelle Moffitt and others are very good at this, and talking about how pathetic the mainstream media is because they can't figure out how to deal with us. And that is the long-term goal. And the long-term goal is to take back the culture, to take back our institutions because they're our institutions. And in the meantime, you should try to have as much fun as you conceivably can. And I don't have a lot of worries about you guys in that regard. So anyway, thank you all very much. I'm looking forward to the panel, and I got to get back to the pie gow tables now. Thank you all.